When I opened the banking app that morning, the numbers blinked back at me like they didn't recognize me anymore. I stood in the kitchen, barefoot on the cool tile, my phone shaking slightly in my hand. The kettle had just clicked off behind me, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. All I could see was that balance, or what was left of it, and the way my reflection stared back at me from the dark screen like a woman who had just woken up in the wrong life. For a moment I told myself it was a glitch. Banks make mistakes. Apps freeze. Numbers jump around. I closed it, opened it again, even refreshed twice, like somehow that would fix the quiet panic crawling up my spine. It didn't. Our savings, the account we'd built together for nearly 17 years, was almost empty. Not slowly drained. Not chipped away. Emptied. And the strangest part was this: I had been planning my husband's surprise party all week. Just an hour earlier I'd been smiling to myself, thinking about balloons and a cake he'd pretend not to want but secretly love. Thinking about how proud I was of us, of him, of the life I believed we were still building together. I remember the smell of burnt toast in the air because I'd left it in too long, distracted by ideas for the guest list. I remember humming without realizing it, that small, foolish happiness that comes when you think everything is still safe. I didn't know yet that while I was planning his celebration, he was funding his escape. Before all of this, my life wasn't flashy. It was steady. And for a long time, I thought steady meant secure. My husband, Marcus, and I met in our late 20s. He was the quiet kind of charming, not the loud storyteller, not the center of attention, but the man who listened when you spoke and remembered details days later. I liked that about him. I trusted it. We married young enough to grow into each other's habits. Sunday grocery runs, shared playlists for road trips. That unspoken agreement about who took out the trash and who remembered birthdays. We didn't have children, a grief that came quietly and stayed, but we built a life full of routines that felt like anchors. Money was never abundant, but it was managed. Care together, we had one joint savings account for emergencies, Marcus always said. And milestones. That word mattered to him. This party, the one I was planning, was for his 50th birthday. He'd joked about it for months, pretending it didn't bother him, pretending he didn't care. But I saw the way he lingered on old photos, the way he sighed when his knees ached getting up from the couch. 50 felt big to him, heavy, like a line in the sand, so I wanted to make it special. I'd been coordinating quietly with his sister, his old college friend, even a neighbor he'd grown close to during morning walks. I kept a small notebook tucked in my purse with scribbled reminders: call bakery, order blue balloons, ask Denise about slideshow. Every plan felt like a love letter. Marcus had noticed my distraction, of course. He teased me about it over dinner the night before. "You're smiling at your phone again," he said, poking at his chicken. "You having an affair I should know about?" I laughed. Too quickly, maybe. If I were, I'd pick someone better dressed. He smiled, but something flickered behind his eyes. I told myself it was nothing. We'd both grown tired lately. Work, stress, age. The quiet weight of time. Looking back now, I wonder how many moments I explained away because the truth felt too disruptive to touch. That morning, after the toast burned and the kettle went cold, I sat down at the small kitchen table with my phone still in my hand. I pulled up the transaction list slowly, like easing into bad news. There were transfers I didn't recognize, large ones, clean, deliberate amounts. Not rushed, planned. My name wasn't on them. I scrawled back days, weeks. The pattern was there if you knew how to look, money moving out in chunks, always when I was at work or asleep. Always just small enough at first to avoid suspicion. Then bolder, faster. I felt stupid. That was the first emotion that hit me, not anger, not grief, shame. How could I have missed this? I remembered Marcus mentioning fees, once. A casual comment about the bank changing policies. I remembered nodding, trusting him. I remembered handing him my phone when he said he needed to check something, not even watching the screen. I sat there a long time, listening to the refrigerator hum. The house felt different, like it had shifted while I wasn't looking. Like the walls were still standing, but the foundation had cracked. When Marcus came out of the bedroom, tying his shoes for work, I didn't say anything. He leaned down and kissed the top of my head. His lips were warm. "Familiar, I'll be late tonight," he said. "Big meeting." I nodded. My throat was tight, but I forced myself to swallow it down. I wasn't ready to ask questions yet. I didn't know which answers I could survive. After he left, I opened the notebook in my purse and stared at the party plans. The guest list blurred. The balloons felt childish, pointless. That's when the irony settled in, heavy and bitter. I was planning to celebrate a man who had been quietly dismantling our life. And somewhere, deep down, a voice I had ignored for months finally whispered, "There's more to this." I didn't know yet about the other woman, or the apartment, or the lies layered so carefully they almost looked like love. All I knew was that something precious had been taken from me without my permission, and I was standing at the edge of a truth I wasn't sure I wanted to see. Not yet. I closed the banking app, slipped my phone face down onto the table, and stared at the empty chair across from me. The one Marcus usually sat in. The one that suddenly felt like it belonged to a stranger. And for the first time in years, I didn't start planning what came next. I just listened to the silence and let it tell me what I'd been too afraid to hear. That silence stayed with me long after Marcus left for work. It followed me into the shower, where the water ran too hot against my skin and I didn't bother adjusting it. It clung to me while I dressed, while I poured coffee I didn't drink, while I stood at the front window pretending to watch the street. I kept thinking there must be an explanation. That's what love does when it's been fed for years. It argues for the other person even when the evidence feels sharp. I told myself Marcus wouldn't do something like this. Not deliberately. Not without talking to me. Maybe it was an investment. Maybe he'd moved the money somewhere safer. Maybe this was his way of surprising me. That thought almost made me laugh. Almost. At work, I was useless. Numbers blurred on my screen, emails piled up unanswered. Every few minutes, my fingers itched to open the banking app again, like maybe if I stared at it long enough, the money would return out of guilt. Around noon, my friend Denise from accounting stopped by my desk. She leaned against the partition with her coffee, eyebrows raised. "You okay?" she asked. "You look like you didn't sleep." I smiled automatically. "Just tired," she nodded, but she didn't quite believe me. Denise had been through a messy divorce years back. She had that quiet radar for when something in another woman's life had gone off track. "Well," she said gently, "don't forget you're meeting the bakery after work, right? For the birthday cake." The words landed harder than I expected. "Right," I said too quickly. "Of course." When she walked away, I closed my eyes. The party again. That secret I was carrying like a fragile thing in my chest, now cracked open by something darker. I didn't cancel the bakery appointment. I don't know why. Maybe part of me wanted to pretend just a little longer that everything was still normal, or maybe I needed something ordinary to hold on to while my insides felt like they were rearranging themselves. After work, I drove straight to the bank instead. The branch was quiet, that late afternoon lull when most people were still at their jobs. The teller recognized me. We'd been banking there for years. That familiarity used to comfort me. "Hi," she said. "How can I help you?" I lowered my voice without meaning to. "I need to ask about some withdrawals from our joint savings account." She nodded and pulled up the records. I watched her face change, not dramatically, just a subtle tightening around the eyes. "Professional concern. These transfers were authorized," she said. "From your husband's login." My mouth felt dry. "All of them?" "Yes," she said. "Over the last 3 months." 3 months. I thought of all the small moments in that time, the dinners we shared, the movies we half-watched on the couch, the mornings he kissed my forehead before work. All while he was quietly dismantling what we'd built. "Is there any way to reverse them?" I asked, even as I knew the answer. She shook her head. "I'm sorry," I thanked her, because that's what polite women do when their lives tilt sideways. Then I walked out into the parking lot and sat in my car with my hands on the steering wheel, breathing through the tightness in my chest. I didn't cry yet. I was still numb. Crying felt like something that belonged to a later version of me, one who understood the full shape of the loss. At the bakery, the smell of sugar and vanilla was almost too much. The woman behind the counter smiled brightly, sliding out a binder of cake designs. "So," she said, "50th birthday, big milestone?" I nodded, flipping through pages I could barely see. "Blue frosting. Gold trim. We've been saving for this," I said, and the words tasted strange in my mouth. "We've been saving." By the time I got home, the house felt heavier. Like it knew something I didn't. I set my purse down carefully, hung my coat, and sat at the kitchen table again. The same spot as that morning. This time I opened the laptop. I didn't go looking for proof of an affair, not yet. I wasn't brave enough for that. I told myself I just wanted to understand where the money went. That felt reasonable. Practical. I checked our shared email account first. Marcus had always been casual about passwords. "Nothing to hide," he'd say. There were receipts, rent payments, utility bills for an apartment. Not ours. My heart started pounding then, a dull rhythmic ache that made it hard to focus. I clicked one email, then another. Same address. Same name on the lease, Marcus. My hands felt cold even though the house was warm. He hadn't just moved the money. He'd built something with it, a place, a separate life. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. The light fixture hummed softly. Somewhere a car drove by outside. Ordinary sounds in a moment that felt anything but. When Marcus came home that night, he looked tired. Loosened his tie, dropped his briefcase by the door. He smiled at me the way he always did. "Hey," he said. "How was your day?" I watched him closely, the way he avoided my eyes just a second too long, the way his shoulders stayed tense like he was bracing for something. "Fine. Yours?" He shrugged. "Long." We ate dinner in near silence. I pushed food around my plate, the clink of my fork against ceramic sounding too loud. Every word I wanted to say crowded behind my teeth. "Why, how long?" Who else knows? But I didn't ask. Not yet. That night, after he fell asleep beside me, I lay awake staring into the dark. His breathing was steady. Familiar. It should have comforted me. Instead, it felt like a reminder of how well he could pretend. I reached for his phone on the nightstand, my hand trembling. I'd never gone through his things before. That line, once crossed, can't be uncrossed. The screen lit up. I hesitated, my thumb hovering. I wasn't ready for what I would find. But I knew now that whatever came next would change everything, the party, the marriage, the woman I thought I was. So I took a deep breath and unlocked the phone. The phone felt heavier than it should have in my hand. I don't know what I expected to find, a name maybe, or a trail of flirtation so obvious it would slap me awake. What I wasn't prepared for was how ordinary everything looked at first. Emails, work messages, sports updates, a man's digital life, neat and unassuming. That almost made me put it back, almost. Then I opened his messages. There was a thread pinned to the top, no last name. Just a first, Lena, and a small heart emoji next to it. My chest tightened so suddenly I had to sit up in bed. The messages weren't graphic. They didn't need to be. They were worse than that, familiar. Did you get home safe? I miss you already. Next week feels too far away. I scrolled, my thumb moving on instinct while my mind lagged behind. Photos loaded slowly, each one a small blow. Marcus smiling in places I didn't recognize. A woman's hand in his manicured resting on his knee. A selfie of the two of them in a mirror, her head on his shoulder, his arm wrapped around her waist like it belonged there. I felt a sound rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down. He stirred beside me, mumbling something in his sleep, and I froze until his breathing settled again. I slipped out of bed and went into the bathroom. Closing the door quietly, I sat on the edge of the tub with the phone glowing in my lap, the tile cold beneath my feet. There were receipts too. Dinners, weekend getaways, groceries that weren't ours. That apartment again. Showing up in utilities and delivery confirmations, 3 months, at least. My reflection in the mirror looked pale, older somehow. I stared at myself like I was meeting a stranger, a woman who had believed in something that no longer existed. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt hollow. When I finally put the phone back, my hands were steady. That scared me more than shaking would have. Something in me had shifted from disbelief to clarity, and clarity is a dangerous thing. The next morning, Marcus kissed my cheek before work. "Love you," he said casually, already halfway out the door. I watched him leave and thought about how easily the words came to him. How lightly that day I didn't go to work. I called in sick and sat at the kitchen table with a notebook, the same one I'd used for party plans, and began writing down everything I knew. Dates, transactions, addresses, names. I wasn't plotting revenge. Not yet. I was grounding myself in facts because emotions lie. Paper doesn't. Around noon, I drove to the apartment address listed on the lease. It was a modest building, beige brick, nothing flashy. A place you could disappear into without drawing attention. I parked across the street and sat there longer than I needed to, watching people come and go. Couples, singles, a woman pushing a stroller. Eventually she came out. Lena, she was younger than me, but not by much. Late 30s, maybe. Well, dressed in that effortless way, like she'd learned how to look put together without trying too hard. She laughed into her phone, head tilted back slightly, sunlight catching in her hair. I felt a strange mix of anger and sadness. Not just for myself but for her too, because unless she was a better liar than Marcus, she thought this was something real. I didn't confront her. That would have been easy, explosive. But I wasn't ready to give Marcus the satisfaction of chaos. I wanted understanding before action. That evening, I cooked Marcus's favorite dinner. The one with the rosemary and garlic he always praised. He noticed. "Something smells amazing," he said, loosening his tie. "Just felt like cooking," I replied, my voice calm. Too calm, maybe. Over dinner, I asked casually, "How's work been?" "Still late nights," he nodded. "Yeah. You know how it is." I watched his face carefully, the way he didn't quite meet my eyes, the way his jaw tightened when he swallowed. "Must be exhausting," I said. "Keeping up with everything." He paused, fork hovering mid-air. "What do you mean?" I smiled faintly. "Just life. 50's coming up, a lot to juggle." Something flickered across his expression, guilt maybe. Or fear. He looked away. That night, when we lay in bed, I turned toward him. "Marcus," I said softly. "Is there anything you need to tell me?" He was quiet for a long moment. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, loud in the darkness. "No," he said finally. "Why?" I nodded. "Just checking." The lie settled between us like a third presence. I didn't sleep much. My mind kept circling the same question: why take the money? An affair was betrayal enough. Draining our savings crossed into something colder, more deliberate. The answer came 2 days later when I found a folder on his laptop labeled Future. Inside were budgets, plans, a timeline. He wasn't just cheating, he was preparing to leave. There was even a note, typed unfinished, about how to tell her, me, reduced to a pronoun in my own marriage. That's when I cried, quietly into my sleeve, so the sound wouldn't echo through the house. I cried for the years, for the trust, For the version of myself who thought loyalty protected you. But beneath the grief, something else began to grow, a steady resolve. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to scream. And I certainly wasn't going to throw him a party he'd paid for with my future. If Marcus had planned an exit, then I would plan something too. Not revenge. Truth and timing. I stopped planning the party that night. The notebook went into the bottom drawer of the kitchen cabinet, beneath old menace and take-out napkins we never used. I didn't tear the pages out. I didn't throw it away. I just closed it, the way you close a chapter you're not ready to read again. For the next few days, I moved through the house like a guest. I did what needed to be done: laundry, dishes, small talk. But I kept my emotions folded neatly inside me, like a letter I wasn't ready to send. Marcus noticed the distance. "You okay?" he asked one evening, watching me rinse a plate. "Just tired," I said, the same lie he'd used on me. He reached for my hand, and for a second, I let him hold it. His palm was warm. Familiar, it made my chest ache. "I don't want you to feel alone," he said. The irony almost made me laugh. That night, after he fell asleep, I went back to the laptop. This time, I wasn't searching blindly. I knew what I was looking for. I copied everything: statements, emails, budgets, lease agreements, screenshots of messages. I sent them to a private email account I'd set up earlier that day, one Marcus didn't know about. It felt surreal, archiving the evidence of my own betrayal, like I was preserving a crime scene. The next step was harder. I called a lawyer, saying the words out loud. My husband emptied our savings, made it real in a way nothing else had. The lawyer listened quietly, asked practical questions, took notes. "He didn't have the right to do this without your consent," she said, "especially if he was planning separation." The word separation echoed in my ears. She explained my options: legal ones, boring ones, necessary ones. She didn't promise justice would feel satisfying. She promised it would be fair. That mattered more. When I hung up, I sat alone in the living room, the evening light stretching long across the floor. I thought about the years Marcus and I had spent building trust, the way we'd always prided ourselves on being partners. Partnerships don't steal. The confrontation happened sooner than I expected. Marcus came home early one afternoon, his expression tense. He set his keys down carefully, like he was bracing for something fragile. "Did you go through my phone?" he asked. I didn't pretend not to understand. "Yes," he exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. "You shouldn't have done that." I laughed then, a short, humorless sound. "You emptied our savings." He flinched. "I was going to tell you?" "When?" I asked. "After you left." Silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. "She needed help," he said finally. I stared at him. "So did I." He sat down heavily on the couch. "It's not what you think." "That's funny," I said softly. "Because it's exactly what I think." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration edging his voice. "Lena and I, it just happened. I didn't plan it." "But the budgets?" I said. "The apartment. Those were planned." He looked away. "I was trying to make the transition easier," he said. "For both of us." I felt something break inside me then, not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet snapping of whatever hope I'd been holding on to. "You planned to leave," I said. "And you funded it with my future." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said. That was the moment I realized how small his understanding of pain really was. "I've spoken to a lawyer," I said calmly. His head snapped up. "You what?" "I know what you took," I continued. "And I know what you owe." The color drained from his face. "You're overreacting." "No," I said. "I'm responding." He stood abruptly. "You don't have to do this. We can figure it out." "I'll pay it back." "With what?" I asked. "The life you've already started." That night, he didn't sleep in our bed. The next day, I canceled the bakery order. The woman on the phone sounded disappointed. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Would already started the design." "Yes," I said. "I'm sure." Word spread faster than I expected. Marcus's sister called first, then his mother. Questions wrapped in concern, concern wrapped in judgment. "I heard you're making things difficult," his mother said gently. "I'm protecting myself," I replied. Marcus moved out that weekend. He took clothes, books, his old guitar. He didn't take the couch, or the photos, or the houseplants I'd kept alive for years. As he stood in the doorway, keys in hand, he looked smaller than I remembered. "I never meant for it to end like this," he said. "Neither did I answered. When the door closed behind him, the house exhaled. I sat on the floor and let myself cry then, not loudly, not with rage, but with the deep, aching grief of someone mourning a life that had already ended months ago. But beneath the tears there was something else: relief. The truth was out in the open now, and with it came the beginning of something I hadn't planned for at all: my own recovery. The days after Marcus moved out felt strangely quiet, like the world had turned its volume down without asking me. I kept expecting to hear his keys at the door, his footsteps in the hallway, the familiar clearing of his throat before he spoke. But the house stayed still, too still. Even the clock seemed louder, every tick a reminder that time was moving forward whether I was ready or not. I didn't tell many people what had happened. Not at first, I told Denise, because she already knew something was wrong. We sat in her car during lunch break, the windows rolled down, the hum of traffic in the distance. He drained the savings, I said. The words came out flat like they belonged to someone else. Denise's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God! And he was planning to leave, I added. He'd already built a life with someone else. She shook her head slowly. That's not just cheating, she said. That's theft. Hearing it framed that way made something settle in my chest. I wasn't being dramatic, I wasn't overreacting. What had happened had a name. The legal process moved forward quietly. Methodically, Marcus didn't fight it the way I thought he might. Maybe guilt softened him, maybe fear did. The lawyer handled most of the communication. I read emails with careful detachment, signing documents, answering questions. Each signature felt like a small reclaiming. Money came back slowly. Not all of it. Not enough to erase the damage. But enough to remind me that what he'd done had consequences beyond broken trust. The public part came whether I wanted it or not. Someone from Marcus's work reached out, an awkward, halting call about personal matters, affecting professional ones. His sister stopped speaking to me altogether. His mother left a voicemail full of sighs and disappointment. You didn't have to humiliate him, she said. I listened to the message twice, then deleted it. What I did do, what I couldn't stop, was tell the truth when people asked. Not with bitterness. Not with drama. Just facts. He drained our savings and planned to leave, I'd say. I found out. Most people didn't know what to say after that. Silence did the work for me. One afternoon, about a month after Marcus left, I ran into Lena. It wasn't planned. It was a grocery store of all places, the kind of ordinary setting where life keeps going even when yours feels paused. She recognized me before I said a word. I could tell by the way her face drained of color. I didn't know, she said quickly, her voice low. I swear I didn't know about the money. I believed her. Or at least I believed she believed herself. He told me you were separated, she continued. That everything was settled. I nodded slowly. Wasn't, she swallowed. He didn't tell me you were still planning things. A future? I was planning his birthday party, I said quietly, her eyes filled with tears. She covered her mouth. Oh, there was a pause, long, heavy. I've ended it, she said finally. When I found out, I studied her face. The guilt, the confusion, the sadness. She looked more like a woman who'd been sold a lie than one who'd happily stolen another life. Take care of yourself, I said, and meant it. I walked away feeling lighter than I expected. Healing didn't come all at once. It came in small, almost unnoticeable ways. I rearranged the living room, bought new sheets. Took up morning walks I used to skip because Marcus hated waking up early. I learned how to sit with my own company again, the sound of my breathing, the rhythm of my steps. One evening, I found the party notebook again. I sat at the kitchen table and flipped through the pages, guest lists, color schemes, little hearts I'd drawn without thinking. I felt a pang, but it wasn't sharp anymore. It was distant, like remembering a song from a different life. I didn't throw it away. Instead, I turned to the back and wrote something new. For me, a small trip. A savings goal that belonged to no one else. A future that didn't require permission. Marcus called once months later. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, he said. His voice sounded smaller. For everything. I believed he was sorry. But sorry doesn't rebuild trust. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said. But it won't be with me. When I hung up, I didn't cry. That felt like progress. I still had moments, grocery aisles, empty evenings, where the grief crept in. But it no longer defined me. It was just a chapter, not the whole book. And sometimes, when I thought about that surprise party I never threw, I realized something important. The celebration I'd planned for him, I ended up giving to myself. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They never do. They came in ripples, quiet at first, then spreading outward until they touched everything Marcus thought he could keep separate. It started with his job. One afternoon, Denise called me at home. I could hear the hesitation in her voice before she spoke, the way people sound when they're about to share news they're not sure you want. Hey, she said. I thought you should know. Marcus hasn't been coming in. I sat at the kitchen table, sunlight slanting across the floor. Not coming in? Not at all, she said. HR's been asking questions. Something about misuse of company time. Expenses that don't line up. I closed my eyes slowly. I hadn't reported him. I hadn't told his employer anything. But lies have a way of collapsing under their own weight. When you juggle too many stories, eventually one slips. A week later, Marcus called again. I lost my job, he said flatly. I didn't respond right away. I waited for the accusation, the bitterness, the blame. It never came. They said I violated policy, he continued. Travel expenses, time off I didn't report. And Lena, I asked quietly. There was a pause. She moved out! I imagined the apartment, the one our savings had paid for, standing empty now. A shell, I don't know what to do, he said. For a moment, I almost slipped back into old habits. Comforting, problem-solving, carrying weight that wasn't mine. Instead, I said, "You'll figure it out?" The call ended shortly after that. Word traveled through the family next. Marcus's sister showed up at my door one evening unannounced. She stood on the porch, arms crossed, eyes guarded. "I owe you an apology," she said. I stepped aside to let her in. She sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd discovered the truth, and sighed. "He lied to us," she said. "About everything. About you. About the money." I nodded. I didn't need the confirmation anymore, but it still mattered to hear. "Our mother's having a hard time with it," she added. "I imagine she is," I said evenly. "She thought you were punishing him." "I was protecting myself," I replied. "There's a difference." She looked down at her hands. "I see that now." When she left, I felt something loosen inside me. Vindication isn't loud, it's quiet. It settles gently, like dust after a storm. The final consequence came unexpectedly at Marcus's 50th birthday. The date arrived without ceremony. No balloons, no cake, no carefully curated guest list. I spent that evening alone on the back porch with a cup of tea, listening to the cicadas hum. The sky was deepening into that soft blue that only appears at dusk. My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. I thought today would look different. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. So did I. That was all. I didn't feel cruel. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished. The next morning, I woke up lighter. Not because the pain was gone, it wasn't, but because it no longer owned me. I began to rebuild in ways that surprised me. I opened a new savings account in my name only. The first deposit was small, but it felt monumental. I took a class on budgeting, not because I didn't know how, but because I wanted to reclaim confidence where it had been shaken. I painted the bedroom a color Marcus had always disliked. Soft, warm, unapologetically mine. Neighbors noticed. Friends commented. Life moved forward. And then, one afternoon, I received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a check, the final repayment Marcus owed me, along with a short note. "This is everything I can give back. I'm sorry it took losing everything to understand what I did." I folded the note carefully and set it aside. Some lessons come too late to save relationships, but not too late to save people from repeating their mistakes. I hoped quietly that this was true for him. As for me, something inside had shifted permanently. I no longer confused love with sacrifice, or loyalty with silence. I understood now that trust isn't proven by how much you endure, it's proven by how much honesty you're given. That night, I took the notebook, the old party planner, and wrote one last thing inside. Never celebrate someone who steals your peace. I closed it gently and placed it back in the drawer. The chapter was over. Healing didn't arrive with fireworks or sudden clarity. It came quietly, the way morning light creeps into a room you've slept in too long, gentle, persistent, impossible to ignore once you notice it. The first real sign was sleep. For months after Marcus left, I'd woken up at odd hours, my mind replaying conversations that never happened, arguments I'd rehearsed but never delivered. But one night I slept through until dawn, no dreams, no jolting awake, just rest. I noticed it when I opened my eyes and felt calm instead of braced. That became my new measure of progress, not happiness, not forgiveness, but peace. I started therapy, not because I felt broken, but because I wanted understanding. The therapist asked questions no one else had dared to ask. "Why did you trust him so completely?" she said once. I thought about it for a long time before answering. "Because I believed love meant safety," she nodded. "And now I know love also means accountability." Saying it out loud felt like claiming something that had always belonged to me. Friends invited me out more. Coffee dates, quiet dinners. I learned how to say yes again without feeling like I was betraying my grief. Laughter returned slowly, tentatively, like a muscle that hadn't been used in a while. One evening, Denise and I sat on my porch, the air warm and heavy with summer. "You seem different," she said, watching me stir my drink. "I am," I replied. "Stronger?" I shook my head. "Clearer?" That felt more accurate. I stopped wondering what Marcus was doing. Stopped checking my phone for messages that never came. The absence of him became normal, then comforting. One afternoon, I walked past a bakery window and caught sight of a blue and gold cake in the display. For a second, my chest tightened. Then it loosened. I smiled to myself and kept walking. The house, once filled with echoes, began to feel like home again. I filled it with new routines, Sunday morning music, plants on the windowsill, dinners eaten when I felt like it, not when someone else expected them. I took that small trip I'd written about in the notebook. Nothing extravagant, just a few days by the water where the air smelled like salt and possibility. I sat alone on the beach one evening, watching the sun dip into the horizon, and realized something important. I wasn't lonely, I was free. Marcus called one last time, months later. His voice was hesitant, unsure if he had the right. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said. "I imagine you have," I replied gently. "I hurt you," he said. "In ways I didn't fully understand at the time." I waited. Silence no longer scared me. "I don't expect forgiveness," he continued. "I just wanted you to know I see it now. I'm glad," I said. And I meant it, not for him, but for the part of me that needed to release the anger. When the call ended, I didn't feel pulled back into the past. I felt settled in the present. Forgiveness, I learned, isn't about reopening doors. It's about closing them without slamming. As the year turned, I hosted a small gathering at my house. Not a party, just friends, candles, simple food. We sat around the table laughing, sharing stories, the air warm with connection. At one point, I looked around and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: gratitude. Not for what happened, I would never thank betrayal, but for what it revealed. It showed me my resilience, my boundaries, my worth, and it reminded me that the life I thought was ending had simply been making room for another one, quieter, truer, and entirely mine. If you had told me a year ago that I'd be sitting here, calm, steady, whole, I wouldn't have believed you. Back then, I thought betrayal was the end of everything. The end of love. The end of safety. The end of the future I'd planned so carefully in the margins of a notebook meant for someone else. But what I learned is this: betrayal doesn't end your story, it reveals it. It shows you where you've been giving more than you should. Where you've been silent instead of protected. Where you've mistaken loyalty for endurance. I didn't get everything back that was taken from me. Not the years. Not the trust. Not the version of my marriage I thought was real. But I got something just as important. I got myself. I learned that love should never cost you your dignity. That shared money should never be shared powerlessly. And that planning a future for someone who's quietly leaving will always leave you empty-handed. If you're listening to this and something feels familiar, the quiet doubts, the explanations you make for someone else's behavior, the feeling that something precious is slipping away without your consent, please hear me when I say this: you're not imagining it. And you're not wrong for wanting clarity. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't staying or leaving, it's opening your eyes and telling yourself the truth. So I'll leave you with this question, from one woman to another. If someone you loved emptied your savings while you were planning their celebration, what would you choose to protect? If this story touched you, or reminded you of something you've lived through, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to hear more real, honest stories about betrayal, healing, and finding your strength again, don't forget to subscribe. You're not alone.